Hey everybody, Dr. Rob Silverman here. We're going to be talking about food sensitivities. I must have gotten 5 or 6 different emails over the weekend where people are asking me why food sensitivities and why do we get them so much more? I mean, why are people so much more accessible? Is it testing? Is it the environment, which was a great question? And I really wanted to address that. I've talked a little bit about food sensitivities before, but I wanted to go into a little bit more detail, give you some explanations, and let you know what tests you can do to test a food sensitivity. Everybody knows that I adhere to a lot of gut protocols. I like to examine the gut. I like to treat the gut. 80% of your immune cells are in your gut. It's where your macro and micronutrients are absorbed. What type of things are byproducts of having a leaky gut or an increased intestinal permeability? One of those would be a food sensitivity. Also, food sensitivities can cause leaky gut. Having said all that, why don't I go through what a food sensitivity is, why it's increased, how we can test for it, and answer any questions that anybody has. Number one, the biggest thing that you want to look at a food sensitivity is a food allergy versus a food sensitivity. Now, food allergy, it's sort of what a classic allergist would be concerned with because they're looking for an IgE in blood serum. They're looking for that IgE antibody. So that's a very fast, immediate reacting immune response. It also increases mast cell production. So mast cells are interesting in there like an allergic reaction. Those mast cells increase histamine. This poses a tremendous issue if you consume these type of products. A great example would be like pollen and dust. Shrimp, sometimes people are very allergic to shrimp. They swell up. I have a patient who tells me that, their ears get tingly and itchy and stuff like that. They start to swell, and you could even have, as I just put my hands near my throat, anaphylactic and things of that nature. So you want to be careful of any food allergies. Most people will know if they have a food allergy because it's a strong but an immediate response. A food intolerance, if I could just throw that in there, is not an immunological response. It's sort of like a lactose issue or a lactose intolerance. You'll know that you can't tolerate the food, but you're not going to get the same kind of reaction. Again, trying to spread that idea of a food allergy versus a food sensitivity. What's a food sensitivity? It's a different antibody. It's an IgG response. It's a delayed reaction. The response is not as quick as a food allergy. It actually does create a slow but ever increasing inflammatory cascade. So you do want to use a blood test. You do want to test for a food protein. The inflammatory responses are typically slow, but people may have several food sensitivities. So number one thing that you want to determine is what food it is. And part of the problem is, say you're allergic to, say you have a food sensitivity to broccoli. You may not know it right away. You may know and see some things in 4 hours, but it's typically up to 72 hours after ingestion, you will see these food sensitivities. But how do you know that you're not combining or you have multiple food sensitivities, and that's the reason your inflammation is so high? You need a food sensitivity test. So typically people aren't sensitive to one, they're sensitive to multiple foods and multiple reactions to multiple foods. So it's hard to determine if there are many foods, which food is the culprit. And that's another reason why I'm a big proponent of food sensitivity tests. So the real question is, why do people have more food sensitivities? Well, there's something called an antigen, which is a foreign body. That antigen, that foreign body, can be a pathogen. One of the ideas of a pathogen, believe it or not, is a food protein. And the real thing is there should be a level. I mean, I wish we had a chart at some point. Somebody's going to make an antigenicity chart, how reactive an antigen is. So what's a high? Which antigens are, what antigen would be highly reactive? Well, I'll give you a few that you probably already know. Gluten, milk proteins, and egg lectins, which are very high in autoimmunity. Now, an immune response attacks the protein, but only a branch of the protein. Each branch is called an epitope. So here it is. It's 2 fingers. So here's the base and here's the epitope. Amino acid sequences are on these branches. The immune response to one of the branches. So this antigen has two branches called epitopes, and the antibodies attack. So you have an antigen antibody, you almost have like an allergic reaction, but what you're getting is a food sensitivity reaction, and in that food sensitivity reaction, you're getting inflammation. What about cross-reactivity? And what do we mean by cross-reactive? So it's attacking this food protein, your immune system, but when does it go and start attacking other parts of your body that are similar? So each food protein has a similar protein to another structure in your body. That's interesting. Your body makes antigens to both antigen and the structure. So it does so like rheumatoid arthritis. So let me explain this. There's something called a protein sequence. That protein sequence is on the antigen. The antibody sees that in one of the epitopes and attacks it. However, if that protein sequence is quite similar, let's say the fingers, like the distal fingers in rheumatoid arthritis, you then get what we call autoimmunity. So a great example would be nuts, or many nuts have similar amino acid sequences. Many seafoods have a similar amino acid sequences. It gets confusing. The body's immune system gets confused and attacks similar. We call that molecular mimicry. So antigenicity can come from a multitude of things. People don't realize chemical pesticides are a major issue. So, our environment is a problem, air pollution, just the overall environment. Food processing ingredients are added. Food processing, how far you break down a food is going to have a lot of chemicals and antigenicity. Food colorings, a great example of a food coloring would be a red lollipop. Anybody ever use a red lollipop or a lifesaver? That lifesaver goes in your mouth and it's red, orange, or green. Your tongue, which is a protein, also gets the same color. The immune system, how does it work? So many people ask me, how does the immune system react to food proteins? Number one, it increases immune reactivity to food proteins. Therefore, increasing that reactivity to food proteins, you have an increase to food sensitivities. Immune cells, which there is actually the immune cells are dendrite cells in the mouth. These cells tell the body a new food is entering in the body, and when you swallow, food proteins get in your gut, and your digestive enzymes should theoretically break down. So when you think about digestive enzymes are one of your barriers. They break things down because as it goes through your digestive tract, it enables it to break down so you don't have that strong attack against that antigen. Food proteins break down into amino acids. At that point, those amino acids can cross the intestinal lining. The immune cells in the bloodstream interact with these food proteins. If any part of the cascade is dysfunctional, you have increased reactivity to proteins. So even if your digestion is dysfunctional, you may have an undigested food particle. That undigested food particle may pass the gut, and that undigested food particle passing your gut, which it shouldn't, can cause a cascade, what we call a food sensitivity. Leaky gut. As we know, undigested food passes the leaky gut. Food proteins and particles increase immune response. Your microbiome. Diffuse bacteria can modulate the effect of T cells or dendrite cells. Bacteria in a healthy gut produces postbiotics and properly signal the immune system. So let me break that down. The microbiome, through its diversity in its ecosystem in bacteria, actually can modulate the effect of the T cells or dendritic cells. The more diverse, the better that they will act. The less diverse, the more attack that they're on, the more susceptible your immune system is to get confused and start to attack self. Therefore, the bacteria in the gut produces what we call postbiotics. These postbiotics are kind of the residue, but they allow for properly signaling immune system. So poor microbiome diversity, which is very common in America today, it's something that we like to treat often in the office every day. You have more reactivity to foods, and you're basically unable to combat food inflammation. So what's the first line of defense against food residues? Well, we've talked a lot about different IgEs. We have IgE. IgE is very interesting in that's an allergic reaction. IgG, which we'll talk about a little bit more, with food sensitivities is more of an ongoing type of food sensitivity. IgM is an early onset, a typical early one. And there's also secretory A. That's the first line of defense against the food residue. It actually prevents food proteins from activating immune cells. The levels drop from stress or overtraining. So obviously, the higher your secretory A or your secretory IgA is, the better off you are. The more that it drops, you don't have that immune presence, that strength. Here's an interesting connection, and I'm talking more and more about this. The connection is that the immune cells in the gut communicate with the immune cells in the liver. There's a gut to liver axis. There's a liver to gut axis. Interesting that when you talk about the gut to liver axis, 75% of the toxins that pass your gut in your bloodstream get to your liver, 25% go from your gut through the portal vein to your liver. So if you've got a lot of issues or a lot of toxins coming through your gut, you're going to have a toxic overload to your liver. If you've got these environmental toxins coming from your liver, they're going to get to your gut. They pose a problem. So whatever you do, whenever you fix the gut and the liver, you should fix them together. So therefore, just to reiterate, environmental toxins can elevate the gut level immune response. So a lot of people have asked me, I saw a few questions, they ask, what are the top 25 positives for sensitivities? According to the FIT test, the food inflammation test, so I'll tell you where to get it in a moment, here are the 20 that have come up. Now, this is only 20. I can tell you that I've seen a lot more people sensitive to a lot more foods. Almonds, bananas, beef, brewer's yeast, candida, casein, chicken, corn, cow's milk, egg white, egg yolk, gluten, peanut, pineapple, salmon, shrimp, soybean, tomato, white potato, and whole wheat. So you're looking at the top 20 foods that are positive for sensitivities. So it's probably, there was a few in there, like most people wouldn't realize almonds and bananas, but they would be not surprised at the gluten and the dairy and the peanuts and the eggs and the wheat, etc. But the most interesting thing about the food sensitivities is, when do you test for it? So I enjoy testing for it when people come in at the beginning, at the beginning of their consult, especially their nutritional consult. Chiropractors. How many of you find that the joints are inflamed and they're not always responding to treatment? Patients. How many of you are not responding to treatment in the manner in which you would like? There should be some things that need to be looked at, like underlying inflammation. That underlying inflammation is probably something with your gut and could be directly related to food sensitivities. So I use the FIT, the food inflammation test. I get that through KBMO Diagnostics. Good friends with James White, really good friends with Dr. Brent Dorval, who created all these tests. You can get them from me here. You can come in the office and pick it up. We can send it to you if you live in California or Oregon or on the West Coast, or even if you're in the upper East Coast in Maine, Vermont, whatever it is. So we can drop ship it to you. Like the FIT test, we test for 176 different food sensitivities. In addition to that, what makes the FIT test so unique is it tests for IgG, but IgG 1 through 4. There's 4 different levels of, if you will, of IgG. Most food sensitivities test for IgG 1 and 2. This is testing for 1 through 4. It also tests for something called C3D, which is a complement. It's testing for inflammation. So it's already becoming a multi-purpose test. When you look at the test, it also has candida. If you have candida, you probably have leaky gut. Also, if you see a specific number of foods that you're sensitive to, very low level sensitivities to a number of foods, it would lead you down a path of thinking that you have leaky gut. They're now also adding what we call a zonulin test. Zonulin is a marker that would indicate that you have leaky gut. Zonulin is a protein that when the tight junctions are ripped, become elevated. And last, I was just talking to Dr. Dorval, they should have what they call a fast test in 15 minutes quite soon, and that fast test should be able to test for wheat, dairy, gluten with a control. So I'm going to check, I know there were some questions, going to check if there's any more. Where can we get the test? A couple of questions were on what are the more common food sensitivities and what do you do? Well, very quickly before I race off and go back to seeing patients, some of the things you would do is you obviously would take the foods out. So let's say you get a food sensitivity and you come back with 10 different foods that you're sensitive to. You would remove all the foods. So by removing the foods, it's a removal phase. Then you would go through my 7R program. My 7R program, as everybody knows, is reset your lifestyle, remove your pathogens, replace your digestive enzymes, regenerate and heal and fix the gut lining, reinoculate with pre and probiotics. You would then reintroduce and retest, because assuming if you went through the whole protocol and you were able to retest, you would do a food sensitivity test again. You'd be able to reintroduce those foods that you've now tested not sensitive for. Big key takeaway here. One that I really want to share. When you have a food sensitivity, you do not have that food sensitivity for life. It can be for a duration of time. So don't fret. You do not have to remove the food if you can respond to treatment for perpetuity. And last but not least, you want to retain. Retain what? Retain your health. Retain your health by always keeping a good diet, always, for me, removing gluten, dairy, don't have too many added sugars, exercise, lifestyle, get good quality sleep, take your needed probiotics, take your needed omega-3 fish oils, D3, multivitamin, exercise, and of course, trying to manage and modulate the stress even in this trying time. If you guys have any questions, please feel free to reach out. It's always my pleasure to share information with you. We'll be seeing you in a couple of days. Dr. Rob, always yours in health.